This unit of our InDesign CS6 course will cover the 2.5 other layouts for InDesign's control panel. While we've already demonstrated several ways to highlight type, I'm going to show you another one. If you don't have it already, get your selection tool, then click in the middle of the text frame to select it. Now place your cursor somewhere in the middle of the second paragraph like this, and double click. What happens is your selection black arrow tool switches to your type tool, and it places your flashing text cursor wherever you double click in the text frame. Sometimes you'll do this by accident. If you do, it's no big deal. Just go back to the toolbox to get your selection tool and click back in. But if you can train yourself to do this on purpose, like this, it's the fastest way to lay out your text frame with the selection tool. Fill it with text, and then format that text with the type tool. Click quickly 4 times, 1, 2, 3, 4, or quadruple click in that second paragraph. This highlights all the text in that paragraph. Now if you can't sneak those clicks in fast enough, that's okay. Just move your cursor to the line just below the period in that last line of the paragraph. Click to set your mouse button and hold your mouse button down, dragging your cursor up so it covers the first letter in the first line of that paragraph. If you look at our control panel, just above the document window here, you'll actually see that we have 2 different ways that we can format type through the control panel. We can set the character formatting controls by clicking on that button with the letter A. Or, if we're dealing with paragraph specifications, we can go down here and click on the paragraph formatting controls, and it gives us the options that are available with that. Click on the button with the letter A to practice options for setting type character attributes for a highlighted paragraph. The first column of options boxes lets you select what font and font weight your type can be set in, based on the fonts that are installed on your system. To the right of those option boxes are the font size and font leading size edit box. Let's go extreme and find out how large we can make the font size. Remember that whenever you want to find out what your limits are with InDesign, you need to enter a truly outrageous number. So I'm going to double click here in the 18 points that's shown in the font size box and enter 1,000,000 points. When I hit the tab key, an alert box pops up in the center of the screen telling you that type must be sized between 1/10 of a point and 1296 points in 1/10 of a point increments, but not, unfortunately, 1,000,000 points. Click the OK button to return to the default setting in your control panel, and now you know the acceptable range of font sizes that you can set in InDesign CS6. Let's now work with that lower box, the font leading size box. This refers to the space in between lines of type. The term leading comes from the days when printers hand set blocks of type and literally used to put thin strips of lead between the lines to add space between the lines and make it easier to read. To demonstrate, make sure that all the text in your second paragraph is still highlighted. Then click on the down pointing triangle to the right of that font leading edit box and select 30 points. See all that extra space between the lines? That's leading. Let's change that to a more reasonable value, 2 or 3 points larger than the font size. So in this case, we're going to make it 21 points. I'm going to go to that triangle to the right of the font leading edit box, and I'm going to see there is no 21 points. I have 18 or I have 24. That's okay. What I can do is I can actually put the setting I want in here by double clicking in the number and simply typing in 21 and hitting the tab key. This is what's known as extended leading. It gives it a little bit of extra space, which makes body type easier to read. Now, change the font leading edit box to the value that matches the type size. So in this example, what we're going to do is we're going to take that and we're going to make that 18 points. This is known as flat leading. There's no extra space between the lines, which lets us put more lines in a given space, but it's a little bit harder to read. Sometimes we may want to use negative leading, or less space between lines than the font size itself. To illustrate that point, click on the button that has two different sized uppercase letters just to the right of the font leading edit box. This sets what are known as small caps. This option leaves the capital letters as they are, but converts the lowercase letters to small cap characters if they're a unique part of that font. If they're not designed as a part of that font, they'll be scaled down versions of the uppercase letters. Even though we didn't change from that flat leading setting, you'll notice that there's extra space between the lines. That's because when we're setting all uppercase type, there are no descenders like the drop-downs you'd see with the lowercase letters Y, G, or P. To make that type appear closer together and a big block of text, set the type leading edit box to 2 or 3 points less than the font size. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set 18-point type over 15-point leading. When I hit the Tab key, you'll see that type fits a lot closer together. If you change this type to all caps, that's the one with the two same sized capital letters just to the right of the font size edit box. You can see how tight this type box fits. Now let's change that type back to upper and lower case by clicking off that all caps button to the right of the font size edit box and back to upper and lower case. Don't worry if the letters are now all mashed together. We're going to fix that shortly. If you're on a Mac, place your cursor in the text and press Command A, or if you're working on a Windows system like I am right now, press Control A. This highlights all the type in the text thread. Everything you see, as well as anything that you might not see, because there wouldn't be enough room in the type frame to hold it all. If you look at the font leading edit box, you'll see it's blank. That doesn't mean that there's no leading setting. It means that there are multiple leading values in the selection, so it's not going to report any of them. Let's click in the font leading edit box and enter 21, then hit the Tab key. Now all the type inside this text frame will be set as 18-point type over 21-point leading. Let's look at the other layout available. Take your cursor and put it on that paragraph button to set your paragraph formatting controls. Go to the third pane from the top and click 4 times quickly with your type tool, 1, 2, 3, 4, to highlight the third paragraph. As before, this will highlight all the type that exists in that paragraph. If you can't click fast enough, move your type tool cursor to that line just below the end of the paragraph. Set your cursor like so. Then hold the mouse button down and drag it up to the start of the very first letter to highlight all the characters within that paragraph. The first section to the right side of that paragraph button has a series of buttons that allow us to set type to align to the right, like this, to the center, just like so, or back to where we were with the default setting to line it up to the left again. We can set that as ragged edge type by using these buttons on the top row. If we want to set justified type with even margins to the left and right, we would use those same buttons as they exist down on the bottom row of the section of the control panel. The last column lets us align type towards the spine or away from the spine for text that we'd be setting up for bound books and publications. To the right of those alignment buttons are the edit boxes for formatting the paragraph. The first 2 edit boxes allow me to set the left margin and the right indent of our selected text. I'm going to put my cursor here and double click on the number, and I'm going to change the left indent to 1 inch. When I hit the Tab key, you'll see all that type moves over to the right. I'm just going to press the number 1 for the right indent and hit the Tab key, and you'll notice that it moves the right side margin in and you have extra space that sits to the right now of your text frame. Then go to the third edit box from the left in the top row. What this one does is it allows us to set extra space before the start of the paragraph. I'm going to highlight that, and I'm going to make that 0.5 inches and hit the Tab key. When I do that, you'll see there's a bunch of extra space that exists up here at the top of the page. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag the bottom of this text frame down so we can see all of our text. So I'm going to click on my selection tool, drag this down to the bottom just like so. And then once again, select the type tool and then quadruple click 1, 2, 3, 4 inside that paragraph. I'm going to go to the edit box that sets extra space below the paragraph. And I'm again going to make that 0.5 inches and hit the Tab key. When I do that, you can see now there's extra space above and below that paragraph that I've got highlighted. We have a lot of other settings in this paragraph layout, many of which we'll work with later in this InDesign course. Let's quickly wrap up this unit by showing the last half layout that we've got for our control panel. Get your type tool, if you don't have it selected already, and click the cursor just before the first character of the last paragraph. So just like so. You'll know you hit that spot because you'll see that cursor flashing just before the first letter. Now, go to the Table pull-down menu and select the Insert Table menu command. The keyboard shortcut for that, if you're working on a Mac, is Command, Option, Shift, and the letter T. If you're working with a Windows PC, like I'm demonstrating at the moment, you would use the keyboard shortcut Control, Alt, Shift, and the letter T. I'm going to select that command. We're just going to use the default settings of 4 rows and 4 columns. That's fine, and we're going to say OK. And when we do that, it's going to insert a 4-column, 4-row table just before our last paragraph. If I go along the left edge of my table like this, you'll see when I get to the edge that my cursor turns into an arrow pointing to the right. Hold the mouse button down to highlight the entire row. Then drag your mouse button down while holding that mouse button to highlight all 4 rows in the table. When you release the mouse button, your control panel will show the half view I talked about at the start of this unit. Character-like layout settings are over here to the left side of that control panel, and new frame-based settings for formatting table cells are over to the right, somewhat similar to how they'd work if you were developing, say, a business spreadsheet. There are lots of things that we can do with tables for InDesign documents, which we will outline in detail in our dedicated chapter on tables later in this InDesign course.